Hi, we're Nia and Mary-Anne from Seren Health Coaching. We are metabolic health coaches who are passionate about good metabolic health for everyone. We also love to chat about all things health and to share as much information as we can with people who want to make changes to their lifestyle but aren't quite sure where to start. We're going to release a new episode every Friday where we talk about a different aspect of health. So do subscribe and let us know what you think. We'd also love to know what you're interested in too. So if there's something that you'd like us to have a chat about, do send us a message and we'll do our best to cover it soon.
Right,
Okie
Nia, what are
dokie.
we going to talk about?
What shall we do today?
What I thought we could talk about is the whole low fat ideology
Ooh.
and why I think it might have helped to make us fat. So I don't think we should demonize anything, and low fat is has been with us an awful long time, actually.
Yes.
We don't want to go into the whole history because it's very boring, but it was about the 1940s. Scientists started to link in America fat consumption with heart disease risk.
Yes.
And there was a huge climb in particularly men in heart disease at the time. So the message was anyone at risk of heart disease should decrease the fat in their diet.
Right.
And this is long before you were born, obviously.
Obviously.
Um,
Thanks for
but
saying that.
I do remember my poor father having to be coaxed into eating margarine, probably the 1950s and early 60s, because my mother felt sure that giving him butter would kill him earlier. So I'm sure that we weren't alone in this little pursuit.
No.
But you and I know, and we've known for quite a long time, that the message here was lost in translation a little bit.
Yes.
Um, and we do no longer demonize fats, and both of us eat non-restricted amounts of healthy fats, and we'll come to healthy fats in a minute because that's a bit of a cop out.
Yeah.
But the legacy of low fat lives on, does it
Yes.
not? And I'm always amazed at how much it lives on. Do you ever remember anybody arguing against the low fat message? I mean, in recent years, of course,
In
but
recent years,
before,
yes, but
when
before
you were
that,
young,
no, not when I was young. Low fat was universally accepted as better.
accepted. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we accepted that it increased heart disease risk without really asking where that came from, didn't we? Because whole government departments, there were, countries around the world with the same message.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
was really universal, wasn't it? That
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
That fats made you fat.
particularly saturated fats, so animal fats,
Mm.
increased heart disease risk, but basically fats were demonized.
Okay. So let's set the scene. So, because I think this is
Yeah,
still an issue and people still haven't understood
no,
the difference. So many people we know are desperately trying to lose weight. And to
yeah,
do that, most often they resort to restricting their calories.
yeah,
And if you looked at fat in comparison to other macronutrients like
yeah,
protein or carbohydrate, you would see that they are densely calorific. Fats
yeah.
are densely calorific. So there's twice as many calories in the same volume of fats as there is in fat, protein and carbohydrate. So you can sort of see why people would say, okay, well, I'll cut down on fat because fat free's got
Yeah,
to be better.
yeah.
But it's
It,
not.
it it makes absolute sense, doesn't it? That if something's double the amount of calories for the same volume,
Then
that
obviously
yeah,
just cutting
you
that out would make a huge
yeah,
difference. But that's
yeah,
not true because actually, as a nation, we're actually getting fatter, not thinner.
yes. So this is a little problem for this hypothesis, is it not? Because
Yeah.
I mean, low fat. The message goes back, as we say, to 1940, but the real messaging, I suppose, came in the 70s, 80s, where there were aisles of food, and we'll talk about the food industry that were labeled low fat,
Yeah.
and everything that was low fat was healthy. There was no question about um, any products that were low fat not being healthy. This was the point, and
Of
we
course.
we missed we missed a whole sort of essential question mark there. So, so why are we getting fatter on low fat? This is the question, isn't it? So the bit that they left out was that fats were actually part of a balanced diet.
Mm-hmm.
And even if they did say that, they didn't say it terribly loudly. So
No.
fats carry certain vitamins that you can't get
Anywhere else?
in
Yep.
other ways. Yes, that's one thing. But even more interesting, and we'll talk about it, is that they have a lot of other sort of functions in your diet. So they're part of your diet. Um, and you know how whole aisles in supermarkets now are brimming with high protein products?
Well, yes, you know that I have a
Yes, and
particular
we
thing
talk
about
about that.
that.
Exactly the same was
Yeah.
true about the low fat products. So you can
Yes.
see how this works. There were health messages out there from the health people, from scientists, from government departments,
Yeah.
from all those people, saying that fats were bad
Yep.
and lowering your fat would lower your heart disease risk. So that was the message. Now, the food industry are hot on these messages. They will
Mm.
be ear to the ground long before you've even clocked them
Mm.
because the sale potential for health products is huge when you think about it.
Mm.
So they're well ahead of you, and that's why we are seeing high protein products now because the next message is okay, well, we'll leave fats because it's too hard and too complicated, but let's talk about protein because we're not getting enough of it, which is possibly untrue for most of us because we live in enormous affluent food environments. But that's for another podcast. But you can
Mm.
see how it works. It's so pervasive.
So it's very clever, isn't it?
Um,
Because the public health message, with all good
yeah,
intentions,
yeah,
because there was a risk identified and a
yeah,
causation identified, which
yeah.
we know, but we have to consider what kind of fats people were actually eating at that time
Yes,
as well.
yes,
But it's sort of got all blown out of proportion because the food industry, as is their modus operandi,
yeah,
say, well, we can make money out of this. It's the same with the protein. So
yeah,
as soon as
yeah.
everybody sort of was told, well, you're not eating enough protein, you need more protein, there became this, you do not need protein in your Mars bar. It doesn't make it any healthier. So all of this nonsense really. So yes,
But
unbelievable.
isn't it interesting how it's circular, that thing? So the food industry gets the message and then
Yeah.
they tell you and you don't question it and then everybody's chomping on protein bars on the way to work.
Yes. Or after a workout or
It's
whatever
very
it is.
weird.
It's very strange. I mean, I feel like if we started a rumour,
Yeah. What could we
just started
start?
to think, what could we start a rumour of? And this,
Fiber. So we
well,
chomping on fiber.
but it'd be really bizarre, wouldn't it? What, meat with
Yeah.
added fibre. Oh, yes, here's my lamb chop and it's got added fibre.
Fiber and some vitamins, by the way. I think
Mad.
it's really interesting because the momentum carries, so the message is carried in terms of momentum by the provision of those products.
Yeah.
And most products, if we call them that, that are made by the food industry are ultra processed by design because
Yes.
that is I mean, part of the story is that this isn't whole food. We sort of forget that as well. So the
Mm.
low fat industry was not necessarily made of whole foods.
No.
I mean, green beans were low fat, but nobody mentioned them. And when I went to America, I've told you this story, and this was a long time back. There was whole bags of confectionery, like sweets, and they were all labeled low fat.
Yeah.
So
Funny how that is.
very weird.
Yeah, very weird.
Mm, yeah,
So, okay, so slowly everybody got this idea that you
yeah,
actually all had to eat low fat, didn't you? And I think that was perpetuated by the marketing teams of these very
yeah,
clever companies that showed you all these beautifully slender women in swimsuits who were eating low fat yogurt, who
yeah,
were eating low
yeah.
fat cheese,
So
and
why
that
would you
was,
not?
well, why would you
Yeah,
not? Exactly.
yeah,
So all of this came out, and the basis of that message was then never really questioned, and everybody
yeah,
then decided, well, that's what we have to do. And me too, because remember the whole
yeah,
the cereal that I used to eat. because
Yes,
I thought
that
that would
cereal. Yeah.
make me skinny, but actually it just made me hungrier.
Yeah, the
Um,
girl in the red swimsuit and all that.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So we all kind of absorbed this
Yeah.
message. We
Yeah.
didn't question it. And
No.
what happened?
Yeah, so I think this is really interesting. It does eventually get questioned, but we're talking 80 years of low fat, if
Mm,
you're talking 1940, where the message first started. And remember, margarine was the first ultra processed food, although we didn't know it then.
mm.
Um, but it was also the fact that we were led off whole foods, so
Yeah, so we had to
we were
then
led into
led
ultra
into ultra
processed foods,
processed.
and you
Yeah.
and I, presumably, pretty questioning individuals, as we probably always have been, were buying low fat yogurts. We would not have dreamt of buying full fat. And I suspect there weren't any actually. I suspect almost all the yogurts on the shelf would have been low fat. And what did they
Well,
have to do?
It's pretty hard
Yeah.
actually to find one that isn't it?
So what did they have to do to low fat products to make them taste good? Is there an interest about the fact that if you put fat into your mix of nutrients, that it makes it taste better?
Well, if you cut the fat out, it makes it taste disgusting, let's be honest, doesn't it?
Exactly.
So they have to put in something to make it taste better. And what is that they put
Exactly.
in? It's the sugar.
And starches, maybe. So sugars and starches to thicken foods, to give
Yeah.
them that same mouth feel that you would get with the fats. So
Mm.
now we've got a double problem. We're scared of fats because they make us have heart disease,
Yeah.
and the correlation is not questioned.
No.
And so, if you want to provide healthy food for your family, you will be buying low fat. But now, what we don't realize is we're also buying a huge amount of ultra processed
Processed
food
food.
without question again.
Yeah.
Um, and the other little interest we're talking about, the flavor of adding fat to your food, is we know now why some foods are so attractive in
Yeah.
terms of mouthfeel, don't we?
Because that's
Like,
that mixture. So
yeah,
fats and
yeah,
sugar, for example, in
yes.
ice cream, yum.
Yes, ice cream.
And
That's such a good example,
yeah.
isn't it? Who doesn't love that feel of ice cream in their mouth? I don't know
Yeah.
many people.
Not many people who don't. No, and good
Chocolate?
ice cream, definitely. Chocolate,
Yeah.
like the proper
Chocolate?
milk chocolate,
Yeah.
definitely. But
Yeah.
even
Oh,
like
yeah. Milk.
um, you
Cake?
know, cake, yeah.
Yeah.
Anything really. Pudding, any
Cookies?
pudding.
Yeah. Yeah, all
But
those sort of things where you get that bliss point of
yeah.
sugar to
Mm,
fat ratio are hard to resist if you're
yeah.
talking about taste. We've said really, so if you take fat out of the diet, you have to replace it with something else.
Mm.
So very low fat diets tend to be less satisfying if we're talking about that density of nutrition.
So you've
So
got the
so
problem if you take the fat
yeah,
out and you add the
yeah,
starches and the sugar, you're
yeah,
less satisfied, so you actually
yeah,
feel hungrier, so you'll actually eat
yes,
more than you would have done
exactly.
had you
Yeah.
eaten just the one yogurt that had fat in it.
So when we changed our diets, and maybe at slightly different times, but when I started to eat, high fat, should we call it high fat? Not really.
No,
It's
because actually it's
it's
not.
five
No,
percent fat,
just
but
fat, just a little bit
yeah,
that's not low fat. Yeah.
yeah. So Greek yogurt's a great example. Greek yogurt has between sort of full fat dairy, which is about 4.3% or something. So quite a lot of the yogurts will be 5%
Mm.
to 10%, depending how strained they are. So the Greek yogurt tends to be strained, and some of the lactose comes off, which makes it more concentrated
Yeah.
and luscious tasting, but it's slightly higher fat. But we're still talking quite low in terms of the ratio in that
Mm.
food. So even
Mm.
the highest Greek yogurts are probably 10%. So there's
Mm.
90% in there that's
Not fat.
protein and other things. It's
Yeah.
not just.
Yeah.
So we forget that. We're all about,
But
if
the
something's
funny thing
full
is
fat,
once you actually taste the difference. So I never
yes,
when
you
I was
just,
younger, always bought low fat yogurts. You know those
yeah,
I'm not going to tell you the brand just in case,
no.
but the ones that are somebody light, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so everyone was always eating these and I remember that everybody else in the
Yes.
house seemed to be fine about eating them, but I really found them disgusting. And I don't know
Did
whether
you?
it was because they were just really watery, they were really thin,
Yeah.
and they
Yeah.
had a really
Too
nasty
discerning by
aftertaste.
half. Yeah.
Obviously, I'm some
Yeah.
sort of super taster, Marianne.
Yeah.
Well, no, but I was convinced that I didn't like yogurt because of that.
Yes. So most people will tell you they don't like plain yogurt. They could eat the strawberry yogurt because
Yeah.
that had some flavoring and sugar added. But
Mm.
if you ate plain low-fat yogurt, it was truly disgusting
So,
because it was
yeah. So it was a massive
tart,
surprise to
watery.
me that I
Yeah.
actually do like yogurt. I just have to eat the proper stuff. So as with
Funny that,
most
isn't
things in
it?
my life, I have to choose the expensive option or
Yes.
the proper
But
option. It's
but
funny.
what you know now is that you can eat less of that luscious Greek yogurt in a bowl
Yeah,
and get more satisfied than a whole bowl of that low fat, watery
yucky
stuff.
stuff.
And
Yeah.
you'd have to really shove it down because it would taste pretty
Yeah.
disgusting.
Yeah, yeah.
So the first time I ever ate, I'm just showing off now, very gorgeous Greek yogurt was on a boat on a Greek
Oh,
island where we bought yogurt, peaches, and honey. This is so showy off. And we got on this boat and
when
we
was the
sat on
last
the
time you
deck
went on a boat
eating.
in the Mediterranean Sea, Marianne?
Yeah, you know that. But that was the
With your
first time
private
I'd ever
yacht?
eaten really delicious. Both
Yeah,
yogurt and the honey was some local honey,
yeah. And you
and
don't need a
the
lot, you just need a
peaches.
drizzle. Yeah.
Oh, and we used to put nuts on. I mean, this is long before, when you were probably still in a bassinet, but it was absolutely delicious. And
Yeah.
I came home to find there wasn't anything like that
No,
in
no.
shops. Okay,
So,
so Greek yogurt's a good example of
yeah,
this
and then we've
fat
got
story, isn't it?
other healthy fats, haven't we? Like
Yeah,
olive oil and
yeah,
avocados and nuts
yeah,
and oily fish, all of
yeah.
which we eat without worrying about anything.
Yes, and I think the other thing to say is that much of this is about restricting calories. So there'll still be people about who restrict fat as a way of restricting calories. You can't deny
Mm,
that
mm,
it's easier. But I think in the end, I think what we've proved is that eating small amounts of that mix of nutrients, but getting the right ratio of fat in there is it's easier to stay fuller for longer. And
yeah.
as hunger is the thing that drives eating, although we seem to miss this point a lot. But I
Mm,
think what we missed was that we were making ourselves hungrier actually, and that we were then not excusing ourselves because we were saying we haven't got any willpower. So you'd have that breakfast of that, low fat flaked stuff that you are
mm,
going to look marvelous, yeah, in the red swimsuit, but you would blame yourself entirely for being hungry at 11.
mm,
It wasn't really until we added healthy fats into that mix that we realized there was something in this. And what is in it, if we're talking, physiology, is that fats don't really increase. They're dense in energy, but they're used differently in your body.
yeah.
They are used for energy, but in a different way. But they don't increase your blood sugar levels in the same
Way.
short energy way.
And the
And they
irony
also
of it
don't
all.
increase your insulin levels. Yeah.
Yeah. And the irony of it all with this whole fat makes you fat message is that, okay, if you ate a lot of fat over and above what you
Oh,
needed to
yeah.
eat,
You could
then of
get
course you
fat.
will put fat on. But the
Yeah.
same can be said for sugar. The same can be
Yeah.
said for protein, actually. If
For
you eat
all
too
of
much
it.
protein for
Yeah.
anything,
Yeah. Yeah.
any food, if you eat too much of it, over in excess of what your body needs, it has to store it as excess calories somewhere. So fat makes you fat is such a laughable concept, really, because
It is.
it's not true
So,
in the grand scheme of
yeah.
things.
So low fat makes you fat actually. I think we were led astray, and I think low fat actually increased our risks of putting on weight because we weren't getting that mix of nutrients which
Mm,
satisfied us, and we were more likely to have a muffin at 11 o'clock and more likely to overeat because we
mm.
weren't getting that mix of nutrients. We ought to just say, as a disclaimer on the end of this, that there are still some question marks over how much animal saturated fat
We should have,
um,
but
we
that's
should be
not,
eating in a day, and
yeah,
it's not it's really not that clear. It's actually, and it also might be that people with different genetic susceptibilities might respond differently.
There's not an actual definitive thing yet. Like many things, there's a bit more
Yeah.
nuance. But the whole
Yeah.
point being is that going around the supermarket choosing low fat options just because you think that that's the healthy option is probably not the best way to go.
Oh, okay. Um, okay. That's opened, I hope, the discussion about low fat.
Mhm.
And, if anyone's got low fat in their fridges, I would be starting to question why.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
remember, green vegetables are pretty low fat. Lots of things are low fat, actually. They're just not called low fat. So we're
No.
talking about ultra processed foods, aren't we, really?
Yeah, it was an introduction, actually. If you think about it, it was quite a
Mm,
sneaky little
mm.
introduction, wasn't it? To
Yeah,
make us feel like
exactly.
we had to have a scientific
Did you
answer.
ever call them that? I mean, you would never have called them processed foods even, would you?
No, it's just yogurt with the fat
So
taken out. That's all it was.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm.
And if you didn't want to kill your husband, your housewives were absolutely, it was drilled into people that, if you wanted to keep your husband working, you ought to give him the margarine. I
I mean,
mean,
the funny thing of all of that is that obviously no one wants to kill their husband, but there's so many other things
well,
that are
some
more
people do,
likely. Well,
but
some,
yes.
but there are so many other things that are more likely, aren't there? It's very funny.
Now, interestingly, just a little anecdote on the end of this is that I actually always joke that I fed my husband high fat products
Yeah,
because I was keen on a
short
second
marriage.
husband as a bit of a joke. But it sort of
Backfired
backfired
on
on me
you.
now. Yeah, it's backfired because he's got a great heart actually, and he's now in his early 70s. So yeah,
And
backfired.
how many
Sorry.
years have you been married?
Yes, too many. Yes, that. So yes, I should
So
have done low
so
fat, shouldn't I? Oh
basically,
dear.
you have been
Yeah.
hoist with your own petard there, Mary-Anne. Never
It's
mind.
actually true. It is a true story. Well, not the malicious bit of the truth, but more
No.
the fact that we've always eaten butter and full fat milk, and
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah.
It's a joke, really, but it does backfire. Yes,
She still
it does
loves you.
backfire. Who knows? I'm
Right.
still here.
Still here. Right.
Right.
See you soon.
See you soon. Bye. For
Bye.
now.